Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 564 for the 11th of August 2019. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. Cold snap. Does cold snap? What does heat do if cold snaps? Snow. Not in Sydney, but close by Sydney in the mountains. Freezing winds, icebergs, sleet, polar bears, you name it. Actually, it's the sort of weather I like. Coming up on this week's show, I catch up with a friend I've never met, Pontus Bockman from Sweden. Pontus is part of the European Skeptics podcast, one of the three people doing that, as they like to say, the real ESP experience. Pontus will be telling us about recent victories for skeptics in Sweden, and also about the upcoming European Skeptics Congress in Belgium. The joy of skepticism, it says here, looking quickly at the European Skeptics Congress page. 18th European Skeptics Congress 2019. Every other year, skeptics from all over Europe come together to meet at a Skeptics Congress. They listen to talks about a variety of subjects, participate in debates, exchange experiences with colleagues from abroad, while having a great time together. This year we are meeting in Ghent, one of the great historical cities in Belgium, home to one of its main universities, with a pre-program Skeptics in the Pub event in the centre of Brussels. Come and join us for 3 to 4 days of fun and learning, and don't forget to sample Belgium's fine beers and chocolates while you're there. That sounds pretty good. That website, by the way, is esc2019.be. If you're in Europe, you might want to check it out. Anyway, more about that and news from Sweden coming up at the top of the show with Pontus Bockman. Following that, a report from Super Science Saturday at the Australian Museum. Just yesterday, Ian Bryce from the Australian Skeptics and the Mystery Investigators and I performed 2 shows at the museum, 2 absolutely packed houses, as they say. It was very nice to see so many people line up outside the door to get into our shows. In fact, people had to be turned away, which was quite something, really. A report about the show and a report about Science Day in the museum itself, with only one disappointing aspect, and that was a little bit of quackery, a little bit of silly quackery snuck in to a science event. Find out more soon. Then to round off the show, we dive into the pages of the Skeptic Magazine, way back to 1996, and read about some skeptical activism way back then, when Glenn Cardwell sent in a complaint to a magazine about an advertisement for the Vinegar Book. Vinegar. And it's quite interesting to note that the author of this book, like a lot of quacks, tends to think that their pet quackery can solve everything. I think the prime example is homeopathy, where proponents of homeopathy think it is the mystical cure-all for everything. And the group here in Australia called Homeopathy Plus, I note, regularly put out newsletters about what homeopathy can fix and cure and help. I think something to do with radiation damage. But that's a hallmark of quackery. Your fill in the blank here, pet quackery can fix this, and lots of other things. Anyway, find out about the skeptical activism all those years ago towards the end of the show. Stay tuned at the end of the show for more announcements from me. But now it's time for me to run downstairs, put the kettle on, and have a nice big mug of hot chocolate on such a cold day. Do I have any marshmallows? I don't think so. Oh well, just a mug of hot chocolate. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Joining me now from the city of Malmö, which is in the south of Sweden, and people who know the TV show The Bridge, which was very popular in Australia, will certainly know of Malmö. It's Pontus from the European Skeptics podcast, ESP, and the Swedish Skeptics. Hello.
Hello, Richard. So good to talk to you.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I was just thinking before this interview started, I've got a lot of friends around the world whom I've never met. But I've sort of met you because we've spoken in the past and I can see you on the video, but I've never actually seen you in person.
No, we have to fix that sometime.
I think I'll take you up on that offer. I went to Sweden briefly, over 20 years ago. I was in Sweden for New Year's once in the south of Sweden, and I walked on an ice lake, which was fantastic. And a few years ago, I was in Oslo, which I love. So yes, one year I will have to make my way to Sweden. But please, for the sake of our worldwide audience, what's the state of skepticism in Sweden?
Yeah, in Sweden or in Europe in general, I mean, we have... there's so much to tell, really. I think in Sweden, we've actually had just a very big win for skepticism, and that is...
excellent. Please tell us.
Anthroposophical medicine, so-called medicine, will no longer be allowed to be sold in Sweden from 1st of September this year. So this has been a thing that we've been fighting for a long time. There was an exception introduced, I think, several decades ago, saying that one clinic and one pharmacy were allowed to sell these nonsense products, even though they were not formally approved as medicine, because how could they be? And finally, this exemption has been phased out, and from 1st of September, both the clinic will close and the pharmacy will close, and all anthroposophical medicine is no longer allowed in Sweden. So that's great.
What, for people like me who aren't too sure, what can you tell me about that sort of medicine? What's the basis of it? Is it like homeopathy?
Well, it's inspired by homeopathy, but the anthroposophical movement become very testy and irritated when you call it homeopathy, because there's a little bit in it. It's not totally empty as homeopathy, but it's a lot of nonsense. It was invented by Rudolf Steiner in the early 1900s, and he believed in angels and believed in very many strange things. So there's a lot of ritual involved. So I know one nurse who actually practiced for a short while at this clinic, and he told me that when they prepared their medication, it was very important to it was stirred 7 times, and it had to be counterclockwise, and then 7 times clockwise, and then you looked at the moon or something. It was that kind of hocus pocus, really.
You've got me picturing somebody looking at the moon, stirring something very carefully now.
Yeah. I'm sure it's all true, and that's why it works, because they put their mental energy into the thing. It's not. So anyway, that's no longer allowed. So that's something we've been waiting for a long time. Actually, the decision was taken a couple of years ago, but now they phased it out over a couple of years, and they gave, of course, the anthroposophic people the chance to, if you can register these things as medicine, but you have to show that it works. And they haven't even tried to do that because they know they can't prove it.
Well, that's fantastic. I love to hear success stories like this. I mean, worldwide, we're all moving to try and phase out homeopathy. And I think it's largely working. A lot of countries around the world are cracking down on homeopathy or phasing it out or no longer tolerating it. So every little bit helps, I think.
Yeah, and we do see that in Europe. Of course, our friends in the Good Thinking Society has been very successful in the UK, getting the NHS to more or less now ban it's not banned, but they no longer fund the homeopathy in the UK.
Yeah.
We're seeing the similar things happening in France. Just a month ago, there was a decision to phase out the funding for homeopathy in France, and we know that the German Minister of Health is also looking into doing something similar in Germany, which is a big sensation, really, because that's where it's very, very big, homeopathy.
Of course, and in Australia too, over the years, it's been... Well, there are people, I mean, you get pockets of people in every country who swear by it and think it's absolutely the best system ever invented. And we've had big problems in this country where people have been selling... We know that homeopathic medicine is fake anyway, but they'll be selling things for vaccination, which has caused a great alarm. Yeah,
and they say, well, that's why you can't say that it's harmless just because it doesn't do anything, because people take it instead of other things. And it's both against cancer, it's vaccinations, it's for everything. So really, really harmful, but it's hard to convince people that it is harmful. Well, if it's just sugar pills, then what's the harm?
Yes, exactly. But as you well know, most people, and I know we're straying from the original topic and sort of concentrating on homeopathy, we can do that for a moment. Most people who don't know much about homeopathy think that there's a little bit of this substance in the remedy. And when you tell them that there is no substance in the remedy, they get very confused because that's not what they thought.
No, because it's ridiculous. That can't be true. Right?
Right.
And they don't.
So that's wonderful to hear that this action has been taken in Sweden. I mean, do you find generally there's a lot in Sweden that skeptics need to concern themselves with?
Yeah, I think we have... one thing was the anthroposophical movement, because they are probably still have a lot of supporters here, even though it's now being phased out. But the other thing is, of course, the anti-vax movement. And we're seeing, we're following with horror, we're following the measles epidemic going over the world, and not in the least in Europe. I think we will look at over 100,000 cases in Europe before the end of this year. And the increase is exponential. It's not slowing down at all. So it's really, really terrible. WHO released a report a few months ago saying they made a study, and they say that the vaccination rates in the world overall has not improved over the last 8 years. We're still at the same place. So I don't see this going away.
No, I don't see it going away either, and it really speaks to how persuasive the other side can be with their emotive fear campaigns, and oddly it reminds me of things in the past where people will say, well, just be careful and don't trust the government and teach both sides, and more research needs to be done and your children are more important. All this can appeal, I think, to young parents.
Yes. And as a parent, of course, you are looking for anything that could help or improve your child's situation in any case. So you're open to look at anything. And that's very dangerous.
Absolutely. So again, I'm pleased to hear of any progress being made in any part of the world. But now, how long have the Swedish skeptics been operating?
The Swedish Skeptics were founded in 1982, so that was well before I was active. So it started with a few professors or academics who got together and thought, we need to do something about this nonsense. Uri Geller was big. I think James Randi did a lot to inspire this formation as well. And for the first 10 years, it was more or less, it was maybe 100 people, 100 members who kept in contact, and there was a small leaflet, or they call it a magazine, but to be honest, in the beginning was just a printed paper circulated. And but then in the early 90s, it started to take off, and by the end of the 90s, we had over 2,000 members, and we're now, we're trying to reach 3,000 now, and it's a big movement. We have our prizes. We, just like you hand out the Bent Spoon Award and whatnot, we have our Shame Prize, and we have our Enlightener of the Year prize as well for somebody who's done very well. And we do get quite some publicity in the papers, etc. once we hand out these awards. So yeah, I think we're a healthy organization, and we're looking to do even more.
Well, of course, the Australian Skeptics have had a long time policy of helping any skeptical group around the world. So, of course, we're always ready to help. And speaking from the Skeptic Zone, the Skeptic Zone has, in fact, been helping in our very small way for quite a few years now by running promotions about Swedish skeptics.
That is correct. Thank you very much.
And of course, we've been running promotions for, well, ever since you started with the ESP. What a wonderful name for a podcast. For those people who may not have caught up with the ESP, can you tell us a little bit about that and how that's progressing?
Yes. There's three of us, Andras, Jelena and myself. Andras is from Hungary, Jelena is from Latvia, and I'm from Sweden, obviously. And we met a couple of times, and we had Susan Gerbic as a mutual friend.
Uh-huh.
And we got together and we hit it off right away and said, we need to do something. And we realized that there was a gap in all the podcasts out there. There was nobody who was covering the European scene per se. When you look at not just the English-speaking Europe, but all of the other countries like Italy, Spain, and Germany, Hungary, Czech Republic, etc. It was very hard to get news in English from all of these countries. I said, hey, we know people in all these places, or not all of them, but now we do, I guess. And we, among the three of us, we speak a number of languages, and then there's always Google Translate. So we said, let's do that. And I think we are doing something that is needed, really. And I think we've brought an awareness that there are skeptic groups in every country. I can say that. You don't hear a lot about the Romanian skeptics, but they're there. Mm-hmm. And I think through this podcast, some of them rather small groups are getting to know of each other, and they can contact each other because we are all fighting the same fight, really. Especially since a lot of the legislation is the same or similar in EU.
Folks, if you're not too sure, the podcast is in English, but that's really a practical solution, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is, because we wanted, English is the most spoken language, or the easiest language to reach out in, and anyway, it was the language we knew best as well, apart from our local languages.
Yeah.
And it has an appeal, because if we look at our listener numbers, actually we have a lot of listeners in the US, in Australia, in other countries as well. And we do also interview people from time to time, prominent skeptics that are not from Europe, such as yourself, Richard. You've been on a few times.
I have, yes.
We've had James Randi. We've had Jay Novella several times, once even as a co-host.
Wow. So
I think it's not just for European listeners. If you're interested in these topics, I think you can enjoy this from Argentina or Korea or wherever.
Well, all podcasts, of course, are worldwide, which is important to remember. I try to keep that in the back of my mind, too. I've got listeners from all around the world. And I'm very pleased to say quite a lot of listeners in Sweden and Norway. And I'm not sure about Finland. I'm not sure about that. But Sweden and Norway seem to like the Skeptic Zone, so I'm very pleased about that.
Yeah. All the skeptics, I would say, that I talk to in Sweden, most of them, they are very well aware of what you're doing, Richard. So, yes.
Now, of course, here in Australia, coming up in December, we've got Skepticon 2019. We've got the Skeptics Guide to the Universe and Susan Gerbic, who we mentioned before. I know there's big conventions coming up in Las Vegas with SciCon over there. I'm going to DragonCon. Meetings, getting to know other skeptics, hearing talks are very important. And I hear there's one coming up in your part of the world.
Yes, absolutely. In just a couple of weeks, we are meeting, all the European skeptics are meeting in Ghent, in Belgium, for the European Skeptics Congress, which is, it's every second year, and it's in different places every time. And this time it is the the Belgian and the Dutch skeptics that have come together to organize this. And it's going to be a full weekend, or more than a weekend, really, and with fantastic speakers and very interesting topics.
That would be exciting. I would love to visit that. Maybe, let me see now. Maybe in 2021 I can work something out. What's the date of that?
It starts on the 28th of August and finishes on the 1st of September. So it's just at the month end here coming up. And there, I mean, we can say there will be talks about, of course, quackery. There will be a 30-year retrospective about European skepticism, which I'm looking forward to hear about. There will be animalistic psychology with our friend Christopher French from the UK. Very interesting about near-death experiences and things like that. And then there will be a section about green skepticism. So this will talk about climate change and GMOs and things like that.
Wow. You're whetting my appetite. I mean, I can't be in two places at once, but that sounds like it'll be a terrific meeting. Folks, I will add the URL in this week's show notes. But for now, Pontus, what is the website for that?
It is ESC 2019 with numbers .be for Belgium.
That's the website to go to, folks. But of course, there'll be a link in this week's show notes. Now, Pontus, just getting back to the ESP, because, I'm a podcaster at heart. I love doing a weekly show. How have you found it to be involved in a regular podcast? Is it something that you still like doing? Is it difficult to line up interviews? Do you have technical problems?
Yes and yes and yes. I love it. I think it's my favorite pastime now these days. And but it is hard to. I think we've managed most of the technical things now. I mean, we've done this for almost 4 years, so shame on us if we couldn't figure it out by now. But the problem, I think, the biggest problem is to find time where we can record, because we're on different time zones, and Andras has he's working as a tour guide, so he's constantly traveling. So we are doing the recordings on the most crazy hours of the day, but we do it because we love it, and it's really, really fun to do. And of course, when we got together, the three of us, we hardly knew each other. I mean, we met a couple of times, but now, of course, Andras and Jelena are my best friends that I talk to every week. So it's very good, very good. And I should say, we also have we have Claire Klingenberg, who is She is also the head of the European Council of Skeptical Organizations, which is behind the European Skeptics Congress. She's been sitting in as co-host a number of times, and also Brian Ego from Glasgow.
Right.
He is also a joy to have on the podcast.
Wow, I mean, and you're finding out what I have found out over the last 10 years, nearly 11 years of the Skeptic Zone, is you meet the most amazing people. But part of that for me is sometimes waking up, my alarm goes off at 3:00 in the morning because I've got an interview lined up with someone in some strange part of the world and I have to accommodate them, of course, but that's all part of the fun. And then there's wrangling microphones and what hookup can we use and can I call you and all this sort of thing. It's a fascinating part of this bizarre lifestyle we've chosen. I guess any podcaster would go through that, but I think we're particularly lucky. We're particularly lucky because we get to combine our love of science and skepticism with our love of podcasting.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Pontus, what a pleasure it has been to catch up with you once again, folks. Again, links to the ESP, links to the upcoming meeting in Ghent in Belgium in this week's show notes. And who knows, Pontus, one day we might be able to do a joint podcast where we can all be in the same room with Jay Novella and everybody and you and me and the whole of ESP and everybody we can think of. That would be a lot of fun.
That sounds great. That must happen sometime,
That must happen sometime. But for now, all the way from Malmö in southern Sweden, Pontus, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Richard. Thank you.
Sziasztok!
Всем привет!
Hejsan hejsan!
Have you ever wondered what skeptics are up to in countries where English is not necessarily the first language?
Or are you interested to learn about some fascinating and sometimes very bizarre Europe-related facts, events, or people from history of skepticism?
Or do you just want to know who's been really wrong lately?
You can find out all about that and more on the award-winning show, the ESP,
the European Skeptics Podcast. So, where can people find the show?
You can find it online at theesp.eu, but you can also follow us on Twitter at espodcast_EU or like us on Facebook. Oh, and you can contact the show by sending an email to info@theesp.eu. If you want to subscribe, do a quick search for the European Skeptics Podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get to your podcast.
The European Skeptics Podcast.
The real ESP experience.
I don't know how you can believe.
It's Super Science Saturday here at the Australian Museum. The museum is going to be shutting later this month for a whole year for a massive renovation and refurbishment. So it's great to see one of the halls here completely taken over with people from all sorts of scientific organizations. And hundreds of people, mostly children here as well. Really good to see. I'll be performing the Mystery Investigators show a little bit later on in the afternoon. 2 performances this afternoon with my good friend Ian Bryce, who was one of the original members of the show way back in 2003, I think it was. But this hall is filled with very interesting and interactive things to do. And I just had a virtual reality tour inside the ANSTO facility, which is Australia's only nuclear reactor. I think they mostly make things for medical purposes there, but it was fascinating. Great use of the technology. And virtual reality is certainly improving bit by bit every year. I really felt I was in some of the rooms there. That was quite something. We have another display over here. A superconductor with a little super-cooled magnet on a track going upside down and round and round. Good to see it in person. I've only seen it on the TV. Macquarie University are here. They've got a big group here studying frogs and tadpoles, which the kids just love, you can imagine. The University of Wollongong with their science space. And kids are crowding around. There's a couple of presenters there with balloons and liquid nitrogen and all sorts of things. It certainly is loud in here. The CSIRO are here. New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Services, the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences have a display. Something called Nutty Scientists. Sometimes I think I'm a nutty scientist, I tell you. And of course part of the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences is Sydney Observatory, which is a wonderful place to visit if you ever come to Sydney. The Australian Museum themselves, of course, have a number of tables here displaying all sorts of things, including spiders. Hello. It's quite hard to get my way through here. There's so many people here. And as I said, mostly kids. It's Ian Bryce from the Australian Skeptics and the Mystery Investigators. Ian, it's great to see so many kids here.
Yes, it is indeed. That's the next generation.
But we must admit to a bit of surprise and disappointment from the UTS here. science.uts.edu.au. We're walking along looking at everything, and what comes up on the screen?
We see acupuncture, and not only that, but cupping.
Cupping. Here, in a science afternoon with children everywhere, and the UTS promoting what they do, and cupping comes up.
Yes, the brochure says it's part of their Bachelor of Health Science in Traditional Chinese Medicine, which lists acupuncture. It doesn't put cupping on that page, but apparently cupping is one of the modalities you learn. So so much for science and evidence-based practices.
You know what? This might be worth the Ben Spoon nomination.
Indeed, yes. Let's look into that.
And, of course, the UTS stands for the University of Technology in Sydney. And it's not too far from here, really. It's down the road and around a bit. Ian, we just completed one show. We're both eating a minty. It's very bad form to eat something while you're talking on a microphone, but...
That's right. Well, let's do it anyway.
Let's do it anyway. Look at this. The crowd's just pouring in. Mums and dads and kids ready for the next Mystery Investigator show.
It's like a second sell-out show, so that's great.
What a lot of fun. Okay.
Full house.
We better get to it.
Now, this year we performed in front of a mixed audience, mums and dads and kids of all ages. Normally the Mystery Investigators performs for selected school groups, primary school or high school or something like that. So it was a nice change. It was a treat to perform before all age groups. And after the show we had a lot of people come down, a lot of kids, for photographs and thanking us, which is so nice, and a lot of parents coming down saying how much they enjoyed the show, which means I think the mix is probably pretty good. It's got a lot of very interesting things like examples of pareidolia. It ends with pictures from Mars, which a lot of the parents really seem to like. And the water divining, the water dowsing tests in the middle of the show always keep the audience spellbound. Although I must say a strange thing happened in show 1 where we were demonstrating the bed of nails. And before I lie down on the bed of nails, I show everybody that the nails are real. We have a member of the audience come down and test the nails by touching them and making sure they're real. Then I sort of drop the bed of nails down on the ground so it makes a big thud, so people can tell it's a heavy bed of nails. Unfortunately, one of the locks we used to lock up the bed of nails got stuck underneath when I dropped it, and it smashed to smithereens. When I looked down, I could see the remnants of a lock, a little combination lock, absolutely smashed. All the bits spread everywhere. Yes, there are dangers to performing, especially to poor little combination locks. Good thing we have insurance.
It's all over again. I can hardly talk. My even though I was mic'd, it was so exciting, and the kids and the adults and everybody loved it so much. It was a really good show. Two shows.
Yes, I think it was great. I noticed we had a slightly younger audience than other years.
Yeah, well, a lot of parents with younger kids, but all the people coming up after the show to thank us was just so it's really gratifying.
And they all wanted to try their own divining after the show, which was even more fun.
We had an interesting case where in the first show, people divined correctly when they could see the bottle, then suddenly all their divining powers disappeared in the next stage, which was a bit awkward. And then a young lady in the second show found the water, which was fun.
Yes, even though it was double-blind and randomised,
yeah.
We found it.
We're just crossing the street now near the museum. So it's quite exhausting being on the ball for 2 performances in a row, but it's a wonderful fun. The Mystery Investigators have now been performing for 16 years. Mm-hmm. Which is a bit frightening when I think about it.
And it's certainly a long time and a lot of shows.
And Maynard helps and you help, and I've had both of you stand on my back while I'm lying on the bed of nails many times, and somehow I survive.
But I don't think we've stood on it simultaneously, Maynard and myself.
Well, one's enough.
One's enough, yeah.
One's enough. And yeah, so Science Saturday in the museum has been a great hit for everybody, apart from the cupping, which is a bit of a worry.
That's right. UTS Science Department has a video promoting the skills they teach, which includes acupuncture and cupping.
Now I have to look into that.
I was hoping that the cupping was a demonstration of thermodynamics, where you heat up the gas, you seal it off, you cool the gas, and then it sucks, it contracts.
Yeah.
But it was nothing to do with that. It was traditional Chinese medicine, so that was a bit disappointing.
Well, what I found disappointing was that cupping was on display on their promotional video, and there were hundreds of kids walking past.
Yes, indeed.
Not a good look, UTS, not a good look.
Alongside real science, like how to filter water, how to purify seawater and so forth. Real science.
Lots of real science there today.
Alongside acupuncture and cupping.
Yeah.
We might be having a word to them about that.
But, I mean, on the positive side, it was gratifying to do such good shows, and I must admit to, I wouldn't say plagiarising Carl Sagan, but inspired. Towards the end of our show, we have a picture of the Earth from Mars, and I talk about the pale blue dot.
Yes, that's right. It's quite revealing to think that all of the kids there and their parents and all of the history of mankind took place not in the universe at large, but in one tiny little pale blue dot.
Yeah.
That impressed the kids, I think.
It did. We got a lot of oohs and ahs, which was really nice.
I think it'll encourage them to take better care of our pale blue dot than their parents.
Hopefully so. Well, I have to take care of my voice. It's just about shot now, I think, Ian. We might... we're heading downtown Sydney at the moment, maybe to find a nice watering hole or something, and then look forward to 2020.
The Surf Coast Summer Spring Skeptic Camp, 14th of September. The Surf Coast Summer Spring Skeptic Camp, SCSSC, is Australia's longest running Skeptic Camp. This year we are celebrating our 7th year. If you want to share something on a skeptically related topic in which you are interested, highlight some practices that you see as dubious that need to be brought to the attention of the skeptical community, please offer to share your thoughts. This is a sharing event where many contributors combine to make a great day. The event is free. However, please provide your own lunch, but don't worry, there are plenty of options locally. Tea, coffee and biscuits will be provided all day. That's Saturday the 14th of September 2019, 10:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. The location is Aireys Inlet Community Hall, 6 Great Ocean Road, Aireys Inlet, Victoria. Offers to present should be made to the Skeptic Groups of Victoria email address at sgofvic@gmail.com. And to register, just follow the links in this week's show notes. The Surf Coast Summer Spring Skeptic Camp, Australia's longest running Skeptic Camp. Once again, we turn to the pages of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian Skeptics. This time we go back to 1996, volume 16, number 1, and on page 32, Vinegar Can Be Used for What? By Glenn Cardwell. Want to get rich quick? Join the nutrition quackery promoters of fat mobilizers, amino acid tablets, cellulite treatments, food combining, digestive enzyme tablets, fantasy books, for example, Fit for Life, weight loss fraud, protein powders, fake vitamins, magic nutrients, finding non-existent allergies, vitamin B12 injections, cancer-curing diets, and the list goes on. Better still, create some new quackery. Success is measured by financial income, not health outcome. A personal favourite is the recent advertisement campaign for a book on the new superfood, vinegar. The advertisement makes the following statements. Scientific studies praise the curative and preventative powers of vinegar. Scientific tests show it's a natural storehouse of vitamins and minerals, over 93 different components, to fight what ails you and to help extend life. You'll learn how to melt away pounds with a mealtime vinegar cocktail. Just 1 spoonful of apple cider vinegar is endowed with vitamins, minerals, enzymes, amino acids, and important pectin and beta-carotene. Whoops, that last one's a howler. Vinegar is a lousy source of essential nutrients. In fact, the National Value of Australian Foods, the US Department of Agriculture, and the British Food Tables, McCann and Widdowson, all list vinegar as having no fibre, therefore no pectin, no vitamins, therefore no beta-carotene, and only a mere trace of calcium or iron, and the same amount of protein and amino acids as you will find in 1 teaspoon of breadcrumbs or less. USDA claims nil protein. The number may have been rounded down. The advertisement then lists 20 medicinal properties of vinegar, including help lower cholesterol, forestall osteoporosis, help coughs and colds, lower high blood pressure, relieve nighttime leg cramps. These are significant claims, all of which have evaded me in the last 20 years. I had to chuckle when it also listed the old quackery pearlers, aids digestion, improves metabolism, and aids to maintain health. Nothing like some meaningless feel-good statements to pad out your list. My first complaint went to the magazine that published the advertisement, stating that it included lies, deception, and quackery. The potentially most damaging problem was that the advert was illegal due to the statement, "You'll learn how to melt away pounds." In the Slimming Advertising Code, Media Council of Australia, it points out that all advertising which includes a weight loss claim shall conform to the requirements of this code. This advertisement doesn't. Furthermore, the code states, all advertisements shall be subject to prior clearance by the relevant clearance office. With print media, the clearance number allocated shall be displayed within the dimensions of the advertisement. Any advertisement which does not meet these criteria shall be deemed to be in breach of the code. No relevant Australian Publishing Bureau clearance number was included with the advert. The magazine replied quickly and reassured me that the advert would no longer be included. And guess who was peeved? The book's Australian distributor, Willow Tree Press, phoned me from Sydney on the 3rd of November and advised me against taking on Tresco Publishers US. I thanked him for the warning. On his second call, he had calmed down somewhat. The greatest remedy for anger is delay, Seneca. I explained my great interest in the therapeutic powers of vinegar, and could he please forward any scientific details, as these had never previously entered the public health discussion among health professionals. He offered to send me a copy of the Vinegar Book, guaranteed to answer my questions, as there was a list of references at the back of the book. The answers were easy to find. They were on the inside front cover and on page 2. Allow me to quote. This book is intended as a record of folklore and historical solutions. No claims are intended as to the safety or endorsing or effectiveness of any of the remedies. Remember, these are only folk remedies, not scientifically proven cures. I repeat, not scientifically proven cures. Now, that would have been a useful and honest statement to include in the advert. Indeed, the author has our welfare at heart. We are told that the Select Committee on Aging's Subcommittee on Health and Long-Term Care, House of Representative, 98th Congress, calls the marketing of supposed arthritis cures a $10 billion a year scandal. it is much cheaper to use her arthritis remedy of 1 teaspoon of honey and 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar mixed into a glass of water and taken morning and evening. I looked at 14 of the references listed in the back of the book. Of these, 11 made no mention of vinegar. Rather, they referred to nutrients not found in vinegar. 2 others referred to vinegar reducing the severity of jellyfish stings. This is well established, and the Australian Red Cross First Aid textbook recommends to pour vinegar over the stung area to inactivate the stinging capsules. And as an aside, I'll say it's interesting that in the years since this was published, I think the science now recommends against doing this. We read on. The final reference discussed the calcium content of soup stock with added vinegar, where the author comments, the decrease in pH due to the addition of 60 millilitres of vinegar was insufficient to extract a significant amount of calcium from the bones. This is not the impression you get from reading page 18 of the book, which implies vinegar added to soup can make a difference in the calcium which is pulled from boiled soup bones. It is certainly bold of the author of the Vinegar Book to include a reference that refutes the very assertions she makes. Misrepresenting research findings is common in nutrition quackery. Amino acids and bodybuilding is a wonderful example. The very next sentence from this reference is, nutrition misinformation can lead consumers into making choices that may result in serious consequences, which would be the case if an individual relied primarily on a vinegar-based soup stock as a source of dietary calcium. This study demonstrates the responsibility of the nutrition or health professional to evaluate nutrition information critically through direct research or thorough review of reputable literature in order to provide the public with the most accurate information available. Precisely. And there is a footnote. A complaint was also forwarded to the Advertising Standard Council, the advertising watchdog. Consequently, the advertisement cannot be run in its current form. In a phone conversation with the Australian distributor on the 8th of December 1995, he said to me, "What you've done is a crying shame. You've done a lot of harm to people who could have been cured of ailments." The Vinegar Book has sold 140,000 copies in Australia and supposedly 2.5 million worldwide. Oh, why was I born with scruples? The Vinegar Book, Emily Thacker, Tresco Publishers, 1994. And that report can be found in the pages of the Skeptic Magazine, Volume 16, Number 1, from 1996. And I note that the Vinegar Book is still available. If you Google the Vinegar Book, you can still find copies, e-copies and older copies available online. For more reports, interviews and articles free to download, visit www.skeptics.com.au.
Hi, I'm Darren McKee, one of the hosts of The Reality Check. Each week, my co-hosts and I explore a range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. You can find us on iTunes, your favorite podcasting platform, and on Facebook by searching for The Reality Check, or by following us on Twitter at @TRC_podcast. Until then, keep an open mind, but not so open your brain falls out.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Now, this week it's come to my attention that Wakefield Press, wakefieldpress.com.au, have just released a book called Curious Recollections, Life in the Curiosity Show by Rob Morrison. Now, we've interviewed Rob Morrison on the show before many years ago. Rob and Dean Hutton, were the presenters of the Curiosity Show in the 70s and the 80s here in Australia. And for people like me, it was a must-see after-school show. how to make things, how things worked. Lots of science for kids. I even made a hovercraft by watching the Curiosity Show. And many years later, I actually got the chance to meet Rob and Dean, which was fantastic. And I've been to Rob's house many years ago. I've spoken in front of both of them, which was quite a thrill, talking about skepticism. Anyway, if you remember the Curiosity Show, I'll add a link in this week's show notes for Curious Recollections, Life in the Curiosity Show by Rob Morrison. Now, the little blurb says, every child who grew up in Australia in the 70s and the 80s remembers the Curiosity Show, the science show that encouraged kids to build their own experiments at home. Running for 18 years, it was a groundbreaking television production, winning awards and screening into homes around the world. Actually, that's true because the show was dubbed into other languages, including German, which was quite fun. Anyway, again, a link in this week's show notes. If you grew up with the Curiosity Show, I'm sure you'd want to get a copy of that book. Thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone in a very real way financially. There would be no show unless people just like you supported the show, and you can do that via Patreon or PayPal at skepticzone.tv, and I encourage you to do so. It'll give you a wonderful warm feeling inside and help me pay the bills for the show. But of course, a very heartfelt thank you to the people who have been supporting the show for many years, and the people who just recently came on board. The amount is up to you, but quite a few people have decided that $5 a month is the right contribution to make. And that's not too much to ask, I don't think. Next week's show will be coming to you once again from California as I head over there to get ready to go to Dragon Con in Atlanta, Georgia. I need a little bit of time to get over jet lag. Otherwise, I'm a complete mess. I'm a complete wreck. So I'll spend a little bit of time in California getting my head together, getting my sea legs, my land legs, and then heading over to Dragon Con, where I hope to bring you many hours of interesting interviews and insights and lots of fun from Atlanta. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello to the afterthoughts, the people who tune in after the music. Tune in, keep listening, to play the dice game. And it's quite good doing this because I don't care if the planes come over, which they're doing every minute and a half at the moment. What's going on? Maybe it's because of the cold winds. They have to change the flight path. I'm not sure what's going on. And you might guess that this studio is not exactly soundproof, so I have to stop recording frequently, some mornings. Anyway, yes, the dice game. For those people who don't know, every now and then, at the end of the show, I will roll a die. Sometimes it's a D6, six-sided. Sometimes it's a D10. It's been up to D60 in the past, I think. Today, it's going to be a D100. Well, sort of. I have a D10, 10-sided die. I'm going to roll it twice. Twice, you see. And that will give you a number between 1 or from 1 to 100. I'm going to do this 3 times. Why not? Where's my pen? No, I have to write down the values here because I forget. Here we go. Ready to go. So, I want you now to use your psychic powers, use your predicting powers, and predict a number from 1 to 100. Here we go. The first number is 39. 39. Good luck if you got that. Okay, the next number from 1 to 100 will be 53. 53. 39 and 53, and the last number. How's your predicting going? 50 again. 57. All odd numbers. All odd numbers. 3, 9, 5, 3, 5, 7. 39, 53, 57. How did you go? Where are those cats? Are they at the studio door? Meow, meow. Where are you? Hen, Maud.